Joining us now is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me on.
Where do you see this bill right now? Can it pass alone, or is it still tied to this next so-called human infrastructure bill, the $3.5 trillion bill that Peter referenced there?
Well, the state of play looks good. The Senate is working through this amendment process. There's still a lot of procedure to be gotten through, but we are within days, possibly within hours, of seeing this historic legislation that's going to get us better roads and bridges, better ports and airports, a better future for our economy and creating millions of jobs. We're on the cusp of seeing that move through the Senate. There's, of course, other legislation being discussed, too, to take shape afterwards. It's a separate package, but it's part of the same vision. The president's belief that we need to move forward better than the economy that he inherited. Part of that is the transportation infrastructure related package that we're seeing remarkable bipartisan support for. And then there are other dimensions that I'd like to see bipartisan support for, but it's going to be harder because we're finding that priorities like extending the child tax credit or making sure every American can have paid family leave or doing something about the corporate tax loopholes, those obviously have stronger Democratic support than Republican support. But right now, on this transportation package, it is a remarkable coalition, business and labor, Democrats and Republicans, and I think we're about to get this done.
Well, here's what the Senate Minority Leader and the House Speaker recently said about this.
I appreciate that senators on both sides have worked hard to develop appropriation titles with a lot of good content.
I hope that it will pass. I won't put it on the floor until we have the rest of the initiative.
So back to the second part of that first question, can this bill stand alone? There are some moderate Democrats that say it needs to be voted on by itself, and it is a bipartisan success for the administration. But can it go alone without the next piece of legislation? You just heard the House Speaker saying she's not moving forward with that.
Well, again, these are two separate packages, but they're definitely both part of the president's vision. And at risk of sounding simplistic, I would encourage legislators to vote for policies they think are good and vote against the policies that they disagree with. There is a path to do that for the Republicans, for example, who are with us on the infrastructure bill, not so sure about the other piece. And of course, the timeline will continue to develop, but my hope is that this will be voted on its merits.
All right, let's look at this first bill, the $1 trillion+ bill. This is from the New York Times. It references an analysis from the University of Pennsylvania's Penn Wharton budget model, and it says that the legislation would authorize $548 billion in new infrastructure investments. The tax code would be changed to pay for roughly $132 billion of that, but this analysis says that the remaining $351 billion would be deficit spending, and that the legislation would have no significant impact on economic growth through 2050, and that despite what Republicans and Democrats who wrote this bill said, the growth would not generate the savings, the $56 billion that they estimate. What do you say to that?
Well, we think there's going to be enormous economic growth coming out of this, and I could point you to any number of studies from bodies like Moody's Analytics, which does a lot of close analysis and shows the greater economic growth that we'd see here. But also, I think the simple fact that you have enthusiastic support from players who aren't usually on the same side of an economic issue. I mean, to see the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO talking in the same favorable way about the same bill really tells you something about its economic power. And, we have another deficit that's not being talked about enough right now. That's the infrastructure deficit. It is the cost that Americans are paying every day because our roads are not in good enough shape and they're damaging cars when you drive over holes in the road. The cost that we're paying every day for America to slip out of the top 10 as we have in infrastructure, which leads to problems with economic competitiveness. You look at our competitors like, certainly notably China, making massive investments in infrastructure, not because the Chinese Communist Party is full of infrastructure enthusiasts like me. It's because they recognize the economic power of good infrastructure investments. And so do Americans, which is why there's such an amazing groundswell of bipartisan support for this bill.
Well, I think you're right with lawmakers talking about infrastructure and improving roads and bridges. There are other things in this bill. I want to talk about their concerns, though. Republicans who are not for this, they're concerned about the deficit and debt. As a candidate, then Mayor Pete, as we called you then, you spoke a lot about the federal debt. You said on the trail that it worried you deeply and that Democrats should talk about it. Take a listen.
Time has come for my party to get a lot more comfortable owning this issue, because we've seen what's happening under this president, $1 trillion deficit, and his allies in Congress do not care. So we better do something about it.
So is there any indication, Mr. Secretary, that your party is taking the advice of Mayor Pete?
Absolutely, and you can tell because the president put forward a way for this to be fully paid for from day one when the American Jobs Plan was released. And the pay-fors that are in this bill are appropriate for a bill that's going to grow the economy and grow U.S. productivity. Look, you don't see the number of conservative Republicans supporting this bill that you do unless it's fiscally responsible. And I would also, again, point to the cost of doing nothing, whether we're talking about the federal budget and deficit or whether we're talking about the economy as a whole. We simply cannot be in a robust fiscal, financial, and economic position with third-rate infrastructure. I think that's a common sense fact that most Americans get, and I think it's why, with this bill, we're seeing something that you don't see very much in today's Washington, which is Republicans and Democrats, not all of them, but an awful lot of them, standing side by side saying, yes, this is the right thing to do. Let's get it over the finish line.
Yeah. Again, I come back to the House Speaker saying she's tying it to the second bill, and that's really a question about how that process is going to go forward. What about the direction of your party? Here's Senator John Thune talking about that.
I think that the Bernie Sanders wing of the party is the tail wagging the dog. I think that the progressive wing is where the energy is. It's where the political money is on their side, and so when they pretty much when they play the music, Democrats up your dance.
Your reaction to that?
All I would say is that the vision that the president has put forward is embraced by the majority of Americans. Certainly the majority of Democrats, but independents and an awful lot of Republicans agree on the things that we need to do. Not just this infrastructure bill, but the idea that with all these loopholes, you got corporations not paying their fair share. The idea that Americans deserve to have paid family leave, like people in just about every other country. That health care ought to be more affordable, that 4-year-olds ought to be able to get pre-K, and that community college ought to be free. There's nothing radical about these ideas. They are mainstream ideas pretty much everywhere, except certain circles in Washington where we're trying to make sure that Capitol Hill catches up to where the American people already are.
Well, why
we're
then,
not focused on.
Excuse me. Why then are you having problems getting somebody like Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona or Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Democrats, to sign on to this second broader bill if it's across the board? You say America's buying into all of it.
Well, we celebrate the ideological diversity within our party. This is not a command and control kind of party where everybody is on the exact same page or where one person gets to dictate to other parts of our big tent what to do. We hash it out. Sometimes we hash it out in public. But I think that's a sign of a healthy vision because overall, it's very clear across the Democratic coalition, we share views with, again, independents and quite a few Republicans, that America needs to become an easier place to get by, a place that supports families and workers more. That's the direction that the president is leading us in. It's, I think, why he got elected, why he enjoys the support that he has. And these are the kinds of results that we're going to continue working to show for the American people.
Mr. Secretary, a couple more things. Does the Biden administration now consider the situation at the border a crisis?
Look, we are going to continue to manage this in a way that balances the security of this country with the need to do the right thing. But the most important thing, and you can use whatever word you want, but it's certainly something that has not been resolved over years and years, is the need for real, meaningful immigration reform. Another priority that a bipartisan majority of the American people believe we ought to do, and that ought to happen here in Washington, too.
But in June of 2021, Customs and Border Protection encountered 188,829 people attempting to enter the southwest border. It was the 21-year high, 5% from May, but 21-year high. Is something going wrong on the border from the administration's perspective?
Well, something is wrong with America's decades-long failure to have comprehensive immigration reform, and there's clearly a lot of work to be done there. The president supports meaningful legislative action, and we're hopeful that that is possible even in today's Washington. Understanding
this falls under the Department of Homeland Security, but illegal immigrants are being transported from the border to other states across the country. Do you know how many states or where they're going?
So I don't have the Homeland Security numbers handy, but what I'll tell you is that this administration is committed to safety and health for all of the 300+ million Americans within our borders and managing the border according to those same principles.
Last thing, the president signed an executive order Thursday setting a target for half of all new vehicles sold in the U.S. in 2030 to be zero-emission cars. Right now, there's 2% of the cars that are fit under that are electric. 9 years, pretty ambitious.
It's pretty ambitious, but this president believes in America. You see countries that are increasingly already at that majority level. Why shouldn't America be able to do that? And here's the most important thing. The truth is that the world is going toward electric vehicles with or without us. The real reason for this sense of urgency is we've got to make sure that America is leading the way on EVs, that we're talking about EVs that are made by American firms and American workers on American soil, and that doesn't just happen. It takes policy support. And the second thing, of course, that's at stake here is climate change is real. It is destroying American lives and livelihoods, and that's going to speed up unless we speed up our national efforts to do something about it. Yeah. And EVs represent a national effort to address climate change that creates jobs at the same time as it helps us prepare for the future.
You know, Tesla is an American company making EVs. Tesla wasn't invited to the White House event, and the founder, Elon Musk, tweeted, "Yeah, seems odd that Tesla wasn't invited." Why was that? Is it because Tesla is not unionized?
So there are a lot of American firms that are doing remarkable work when it comes to electric vehicles. We were celebrating the other day the fact that we've brought together labor leadership and the leadership of many of these employers of UAW. We had the 3 biggest employers of UAW workers, United Auto Workers, at the White House. Now, what we're working on in our department and what we were announcing that day was tailpipe emission standards. To their credit, an all-electric company like Tesla doesn't even have tailpipes, and that's an exciting thing to see too. There are startups that are working on this. There are newer companies that are working on this. And then you have some of the most storied, recognizable, century-old names in American automaking, all moving in this direction toward electric vehicles, and we're excited about all of them.
Mr. Secretary, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.